all I think about these days, all I think about these days is getting at that goal that's in my heart. I need a reason to believe, yeah, maybe a cure for my disease.
That song is by Blaine Long. My name is Mathew Blades. Meet my friends.
Hi, it's Tim.
And Beth from the Mulhausen Group Real Estate.
We are so proud to sponsor another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It. You can catch us at tmgphoenix.com.
That's a good group of people right there. Hi, it's Mathew Blades, host of Learn from People Who Lived It. And a reminder before we get into today's show that each of these episodes is presented uninterrupted with the support of the Mulhausen Group, with the support of ASI or Advanced Systems Integrations. They design and install cutting-edge audio and visual equipment. So if you're on the IT staff or you're the IT director, please reach out to ASI. This audio visual integrator has offices in Minnesota and in Scottsdale and 2 decades of experience. And the cool thing about them, they pay real close attention to that last 5%, which is the one that drives you and I crazy. We've got a link to ASI in our show description, or you can go there yourself by visiting asi-av.com.
Welcome to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It.
I thought we should start where everybody is today, guys, and I'll welcome you in, but that's with the heavy hearts of the shooting in Texas, and we're not going to spend a ton of time on it. We're not here to talk about who's right, who's wrong, or any of these things. We're just here to say that as a collective, I think it's safe to say that a lot of people are feeling the sting today, right?
I would concur. I've, like I said, I did my kind of first live, with all this stuff being new to social media and the feedback, that I got, and just talking about it. Everyone's kind of on the same page. There's got to be some kind of reform, right? Don't want to get political with this crap, but there's got to be reform. We've got to do something better about this, whether it's protecting schools or what that looks like. But this kind of shit should not happen.
Yeah. We all have kids that are like elementary age, don't we?
I've got preschoolers, so I mean they're right there. Connor, he my little oldest guy, he just kind of graduated pre-K, so he's going to kindergarten next year. So he's full on public school, and for mom, she's got a lot of anxiety wrapped around it, and I understand that. So
I guess Dave, yours and I's are a little bit old.
Yeah, I got one in high school.
Same.
Yeah, it's just it really is such a weird thing because I just remember growing up and it was like the big fancy thing was the tornado drill and going into the hallway and doing the tornado drill and learning how to accomplish all that. And now it's so different, so drastically different. It's almost, maybe you could talk about it, Dave. I know I texted you earlier and I said, maybe you can help us out in this space, but it's almost a little overwhelming, right? To get our head around the fact that something that scary could happen at a place that's supposed to be so safe, so fundamentally safe.
Yeah. That goes back to things that I've said about trauma previously. You get through life with certain assumptions. And one of the assumptions is that the world is generally a safe place and that you can go to and from one place or another and expect not to be harmed or threatened. And then when something like this happens, it completely shakes you to the core. It makes you question everything that you've believed up until this point.
Yeah. I thought one of the things that, since our show is called Reserve for Vets, and we're hoping to bring in folks who've had that and worn that uniform at some point in their lives, what I was left thinking with today, and Chad, maybe even your live was alluded to this, I didn't see it, but thinking about my own upbringing. And we were round guns our whole life. My dad would bring home shells from his 2 weeks on the reserves. And, my brother and I would kind of put them back together in the little things. And so I can imagine on some levels that there's a lot of people having a real tough inner dialogue today because they feel really strongly about one thing. But boy, they also now find themselves feeling really strongly about something else. What do they call that in your world, Dave? What do they call that in the world of, psychiatric, what I'm trying to spit out?
Cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance. Let's talk about it.
You have two conflicting points of view that are, you can't just point in one direction and reconcile it. They're going against each other.
So what do you do?
there's no easy way to deal with that. First of all, you have to recognize that that's what's happening. If you think that you're going to jump to one answer or another, there's a good chance that you're going to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I think, not to get political, but this is also one of the things where people can get manipulated. There's so much fear that's pumped through the media when something like this happens. And again, I'll take it back to what I was saying before about trauma in previous episodes. Bad things happen rarely. Thank God bad things happen rarely. But when they do, they can be life transforming and not necessarily in a good way. And when you experience trauma, something that's never supposed to happen now is common because it happened to you. So for people that are dealing with this, trying to manage the anxiety and to think through very carefully, like, wait a second, yes, we're seeing school shootings in the news, and that makes it seem like it's happening everywhere. No place is safe. I can't even send my kids to school without worrying about them getting harmed. In reality, these things happen very rarely. And when it comes to managing your own anxiety about things, you have to put it in that perspective, or else anxiety becomes crippling. You won't allow yourself to do normal things that other people do because of a remote fear. A terrible thing, but a remote thing, and something not likely to happen to you.
Yeah, well, and since we're reserved for vets, I feel like this is kind of a nice segue into what veterans experience, right? Like, not everybody who puts on the uniform is going to go through a traumatic experience. Not everybody who goes to war is going to see the worst of the worst. Some people will, though. And for those who had to go through the experience, and Chad, I thought maybe we'd spend a little bit of time talking a little bit about what happened to you in that night that you guys had the jump, because it's like not everybody goes to war and it's guns and bullets and dying. It can be a different story. And I don't even know, Dr. Dave, if you've ever heard a little bit about what happened to Chad, but your incident was completely not that, right? It had nothing to do with guns.
Yeah, it absolutely had nothing. And, to regurgitate this, I guess, we'll kind of run through it real quick. Again, we were on a night jump in Fairchild in Spokane, Washington. Second Ranger Battalion we're kind of known for, or was kind of known. I've been out 20 years, so I'm sure their mission statements changed a little bit. But airfield seizures, jumping in, taking over an airfield, and providing security and doing what we've got to do to allow, some boots on the ground to go clear hangars, things of that nature. So it was a full battalion jump. And again, it's, I think 1,000 guys in the air, maybe a little bit more, and long story short, my chute, the air got taken out from underneath my chute, and they teach you to run off a chute in jump school. To get off that chute. So essentially, if you're on a chute, right, you got the chute here and you're running off the top of the chute. So yours doesn't, because the chute below you is going to take that air. Right. So mine, unfortunately, the air got taken out of my chute and I burnt in. And again, I don't know if it was 20 feet. I don't know if it was 100 feet, 200 feet. Because I blacked out, and I hit the ground. And when I was on the ground, I laid there and, like I said, just kind of checked. Did I compound fracture anything? My legs were super numb. I was vomiting. So all these reactions, and then I almost kind of came to, and then linked up with my squad. And from that point, Dr. Dave, that's kind of where my entire military career went to shit. I got addicted to painkillers and drinking constantly because my whole goal was I wanted to be a Ranger, right? And I wanted to be a full-fledged Ranger and eventually make it, to SF and go up that tier. Unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. Instead of, being that, here's some Motrin, rub it off and let's roll. I mean, that was, what you did back then. And it's still probably a thing in the military, bandage it up and go on your day. And, I was popping painkillers just to get through the day. And then from there, as shit just rolls downhill and, I've made bad decisions. And before you know that, then I'm losing the respect of my internal guys so it wasn't so much a full on combat experience, but it was a, traumatic event that changed the course of probably my life and stuff that I held for many, many years.
Yeah. I'll tell you what's going through my head as I listen to you tell that story, Chad, is like a lot of other people over the last 24 hours have too experienced a traumatic piece of news. It's touched them deeply, especially if they had kids that were the same age as what's in the news. And what you're talking about is you kind of remained unhealthy for a little while. You didn't really talk about it. You kind of masked it. You medicated to get rid of it. And as you were telling your story, I hope that people were seeing the parallels in the news that we get sometimes like this, where you get this awful bit of news that comes to you on the television and you learn this tragedy that's going to change 21 families, I think is the last number that I saw, for forever. Generationally, it's going to change their families' lives. But holding on to it, masking it, not doing anything about it is really going to just compound the problem. And I think if I'm listening to anything Dr. Dave says, it's get aware that it's bothering you, that it's pissing you off right now. Start to talk about those things and feelings, right? Which you did, Chad, right? I'm so proud of you. Use your tools this morning. You go to Instagram Live. You get it off your chest. You're not hanging on to it anymore. Like, that's progress.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to impress upon folks tonight. As I was thinking about what I might say when we jumped on tonight, it's that. Feel this. Cycle through this. Talk about this. Explore how it makes you feel. Figure out where your energy is best served. As I looked online today, there's a dozen or so really, really, really big organizations that are trying to do everything in the gun space, right? Whether it's lobbies or laws or whatever, background checks, whatever. There's already a lot of people that are in that space, and they've been there for a long time. They know what's going on. They know all the rules. They know all the players. And so what I said to myself today was, okay, there are people handling that part of it. What can I do now? What part can I handle? And, I just go back to what we're doing here to try to be with folks in their moments of despair. It's quite possible that today's news triggered something inside of you, something from, your past. As I'm sitting here just having this little monologue right now, I'm thinking, what was there a soldier who saw a child who was elementary school age die? And news like today just brings it all right back to them and brings it back to the forefront. What are you thinking about, guys?
I mean, those types of things are known triggers. Anything that has some similarity or replicates some aspect of a previous trauma, it's like striking a chord on a guitar. The other strings vibrate in the same frequency. So when something like that hits the news, if you experience anything near it, it's going to strike you emotionally. And sometimes you can't even put words to it. Sometimes you just feel, a sick feeling, anxiety, you're afraid to go outside and you couldn't even be able to explain to somebody why. You're just like, nah, I'm staying in today. I'm not doing anything today. So different people manage it in different ways. Sometimes anger, people are internalizing that anger, and then it comes out on family members or other people, or driving. People get pissed off driving and act like fools driving. So, I mean, there's different ways that it comes out. If you recognize that something about what you saw in the news is resonating for you, then take a moment to recognize that and try to take inventory of your reactions. Are you reacting the way you normally do, or has something changed from yesterday? Something before the news, now the way that you're reacting to things is different and maybe out of proportion to whatever is going on.
What do you think about, Chad? I'm watching you nod your head over there.
Yeah, so many different emotions, again, even, like I'm talking about, on the live this morning, we went out to dinner last night with family and had a conversation with my sister-in-law, who is part of the trauma response team for Peoria school districts. And, she's got a different, outlook on this than I do. Right.
Totally.
She doesn't know much about guns. And her first sentence was, essentially these fucking people with the Second Amendment. And I kind of had to say, okay, pump the brakes. I need you to understand, like, there are rules, there are laws, there are regulations that are put into place. Now, with that being said, is there some reform that needs to happen? 100%. And I'm just as big a Second Amendment advocate as just probably any other veteran. But I think if you really sit down, you talked with people and said, okay, what are the worries? What do we got to do? And how do we be proactive so this doesn't happen again? Again, with all the political crap that's going on in the world, it's why are we sending $40 billion over to Ukraine when we could spend that here on school security? We could spend it on mental health resources. We could spend it on, doing something else. And I think as a whole, we got to separate the aisle BS, and we've just got to come to terms and say, okay, what is some common sense gun laws that we can do now? And at the end of the day, I think it all comes back down to parenting. It starts at the home. And what are these parents doing, and why are we not, facilitating something different? It sounds like this kid has had multiple issues. It's all coming out in the news now. It sounds like he was well known to local law enforcement. So there's things there. So we've got to take these warning signs as a serious thing, but then you flip the coin, right? And say, okay, well, law enforcement is shorthanded. They don't have everybody to respond to these types of things. So it's just a massive mess, I think, all over the board, but we've got to try to have some kind of common sense reform and talks about this that doesn't, just doesn't trigger everybody.
Yeah. Great. No pun intended, right?
Yeah.
No pun intended. No, I know. It's just such a strange place because it is one of those things, it's one of those topics that, when I worked on the radio industry, there was always a few things that you never touched. You didn't touch them because you didn't have the time, or that's really it. You didn't have the time to honor the subject. You can't just scream gun reform and then figure it out 2 minutes, right? Like that's not realistic. And there's a lot of topics that have so many layers that you kind of have to, I would hope that a lot of parents tonight would, or even last night would have taken, I'm one of these parents who like everything is an opportunity to me. And so like when I see that in the news, the first thing I'm thinking about almost is, how am I going to present this to the boys tonight? How are we going to talk about this where they're going to know fundamentally how I feel about it? And, then they can kind of, make up their own minds, but they need to know, they need to be given some guidance and thoughts. What would you recommend there, Dave, to somebody who, because like, okay, yeah, you're right. This is a good opportunity to talk to my kids. But what the fuck do I say to them? What do I say?
Well, one of the things that came to mind right away is, again, when people see this in the news, it triggers anxiety. So how many people out there now have grade school age children that are afraid to go to school? That, they see this and then, now they're thinking, well, what if this happens in my school? What am I going to do? So I think that's a good opportunity to, again, put it in perspective for them. Boy, it's a tough subject to not get political.
Well, and I don't think it is. I mean, really, it boils down to the fundamental, the good guys and the bad guys, and it's about our choices. And I mean, the conversation that I had with my sons last night was, listen, you get to think whatever you want when you get older about guns, this, that, and the other thing, but you don't get to. It's that old Dalai Lama saying, which I love so much, which is like, your goal in life at very best, just don't bother anybody. Just like, if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. That's the quote. If you can't help somebody, that's fine. But at the very least, don't hurt them. And that's the way that I talk about it with these guys. It's like, you get to have all your thoughts and your own opinions until they violate somebody else's. And then that's the line. That's where it stops. And you can understand where this guy crossed this line. You see, that has nothing to do with guns. That just has to do with a decent way to treat people. And to me, that's the way those are the conversations that we got to start throwing out there.
Yeah, and I would, I guess, throw this at Dr. Dave, just through your years of seeing this and seeing how society has changed as a whole. When I went to high school, again, I'm a Montana kid. I had a 270 in the gun rack of my 1970 Chevy. Why? Because I was going to go deer hunting right after school before it got dark, Right. And it was an unlocked truck, never had any problems with it, never had any worries. It was something you did.
Right.
Now there's no way in hell are you going to do that in any high school. Maybe, Kansas or something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking like there's still rural America, right? There's still
Right.
there's still a lot of places in America where this is fairly normal and kind of how things work, especially if you're in an outdoorsy place where there's hunting and all that stuff. So,
So I guess it comes down to, what are you, in your analysis, what are you seeing? Is it, I mean, I hate throwing it out there, but is it like video games? Is it just that these kids don't know how to cope with negativity and the answer of no? Or is it the mental health aspect at home is so bad that they have no out to express it, and they feel, okay, well, I'm going to go shoot up a school because that's the best way to express my anger. Meanwhile, they don't know the value of life.
Yeah. It's a tough question to answer. What I noticed with some of these shootings is that the social media gets taken down immediately. So it's hard as a bystander, not, knowing what happened or not being close to the situation, to get into the kid's mind and to try to see, what is it that led up to that. And then, of course, if you're going to rely on media to get that story, it's going to be spun however, whatever story that they're trying to cook up. So
totally.
Getting real answers to that is difficult. I never remember anybody talking about shooting up a school when I went to high school. My dad, when he went to high school, and we're from New York, from the city area, they had a shooting club at Flushing High School. My dad had schoolmates that would bring 22 rifles to school for shooting club. So things have definitely evolved a long way from there, to the point now where kids get in trouble if they, bite their peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the shape of a gun. So how do you get some balance in that? I think there's something wrong where life is not valued. So whether it's a situation that the kids are being bullied and pushed into a corner where they, a level of anger builds to the point where they feel like, well, the only way I'm going to be able to, be important is to get back and teach them a lesson, shoot the place up. I'm riffing. I don't know what's in these kids' heads. I would say that it probably comes from a place of pain. So whether it's pain from what they're dealing with at home, whether it's pain from what they're dealing with classmates, and oftentimes those things compound, right? So if you're dealing with traumatic situations at home or difficult upbringing, maybe you come to school without all the tools that you need to be able to cope with things. And, if you're impulsive and kind of struggling with things, kids focus in on weakness and they pick on it. Kids can be awful and mean. And then that compounds the situation. So instead of, being able to find support and companionship, you end up being more isolated, or maybe finding other people that are similarly hurt, and you kind of stew on that anger and that negativity.
Yeah. Well, and I just really, and I'm going to put a charge out there to all of us, men. It's really, especially if we're fathers, it's just on us, man. We really got to take this one by the balls, and we got to talk to our young men about how to treat people. We got to talk to our young men and give them the license to be vulnerable and tell us when they don't feel great, or they feel angry, or they want something different to be happening in their lives. Because I can only imagine in a small town like Texas, for example, there's not a lot of support there for somebody who's, that's probably got one of those pull your bootstraps up kind of a vibe. That's still small town Texas, where it's deal with it kind of a vibe. We haven't gotten there yet. I saw today, I think that's the same town that Matthew McConaughey's from. That's the town he was born in. And so I'm sure that'll help this thing get a little bit more attention, and maybe some different things will come out of the whole thing. But
I was thinking about the situation up in Buffalo. I don't know what the family situation was there, but nobody noticed that this 18-year-old was accumulating body armor. Like, that kind of slipped by.
That's what I'm saying. Like, what are these parents doing? Like, if my kid's going to go out and, buy a gun or have stuff, I'm pretty sure I'm going to it's not in your car, it's not in your room, and this is my house. So where are you putting this shit? And
Right.
this kid in Buffalo, the hate that was there. I mean, from my understanding, he drove 200 miles because he knew it was a minority community, and that's where he figured he'd get the best bang for buck. I hate to say that, but it's just, I don't understand the thought process that's come behind some of this stuff.
I'm perplexed by it too, Chad. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said they just don't have a value for life. That's it. They just, it doesn't mean anything to them. It's probably one of these things. And listen, I've been dark. You've been dark, Chad. I don't know if you've ever been dark, Dave, but I've been dark, but I've never been so dark that I wanted to ruin it for somebody else. And so that's a different kind of thing that's happening there. And that's really what it is like, how would you convince somebody who doesn't think there's a value in living to live? What do you say to them? That's the hard part, right? That's the Rubik's Cube.
Well, and I think it's like you said, I think it's building a community of men. And whether, you reach out to, football coaches, that are in the Valley, and you create some kind of a community where, there are some kids that don't have dads at home, and say, hey, like, we get together once a month and we talk about certain things. We, educate them on certain parts of life in general. I don't know what that looks like, but I know there's a lot of gentlemen that I follow, on social media that are doing that in their communities, and they've seen some success with it. I know Chicago has taken, a bunch of Black fathers, and they have come together, and that's what they're doing in their communities to try to help these kids out that don't have dads.
Right.
And so,
yeah, that's awesome.
When you have that sense of connection, it makes it very hard to then, want to do harm to other people.
That's true. That's a great point. That connection does make it difficult to want to lash out. Scott says, how much responsibility do various social media outlets? And yeah, my feeling like on that, Scott, is that we've been playing that card forever. It started with lyrics, how much impact the lyrics have on people, how much do movies have on people, how much. So I don't know. I mean, we'll probably debate that until we die. But I kind of tend to lean with the guys on the screen, which is, that stuff's got to start at home. It has to. It just has to start with mom and dad. And if you're a dad, I'm really challenging you tonight to talk to your kids. I'm challenging you to walk into their room and make them a little uncomfortable if you need to. Ask some questions that make you uncomfortable. Okay, I don't care. It's part of the process. Get in there and find out. Poke and prod. You have a perfect example. You have a perfect opportunity. Again, I go back to what I just said. You have a perfect opportunity to do that tonight. This is the biggest story in the news. I promise your children have heard about it. If they're over the age of 10, bring it up and ask all the questions that you want to know right now. And I think you'll find you have a pretty good experience with that whole thing. You get some good answers, if nothing else, or you guys will just come together. You find a place to bond.
Yeah. I think adolescence is a particularly difficult time too, because you don't have the independence of being an adult, but you have the desire to make adult decisions. And, that struggle trying to figure out your own voice, trying to figure out where you belong in society with your peer group, trying to navigate dating. There's a lot of things that you just haven't lived long enough to have enough experience to really know how to work it through. And that's an opportunity for parents and especially for dads. Be the role model.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say, like you said, man, I jump on that bandwagon to challenge other fathers and husbands out there to, lay some groundwork with your boys and get real with it. Take the TV off and let's go talk about some real stuff, because it needs to happen. It needs to happen yesterday.
And I would throw in too, if you know other kids in the neighborhood that are maybe struggling in their own family, if they hang around with your kids or, they're over the house a bit, that's an opportunity to step up and be an example for them. I can tell you so many stories about people that I've talked to that came from broken homes, but they learned proper relationships. They learned healthy relationships from, their friends' parents or from a neighbor that took an interest. And you can be transformative in somebody's life.
By the way, I did want to say, as we move along, we're going to start bringing on some guests here in the next couple of weeks. We're going to start bringing on some guests to talk to us. But one of the things all three of us have also talked about is this thing where we would love for you to join us during the stream as well. And so moving forward, I'd love to give an opportunity for people to join us on the stream. Maybe we can answer a couple of your questions. Maybe there's something you'd like to know from me or Chad or Dr. Dave. Or a collective, and we want to give you the opportunity to do that. So moving forward, just know that that's going to be available to you should you want.
We have 3 goals with Learn from People Who Lived It. 1, to help you feel less alone. 2, encourage you to seek out a coach, a therapist, a church, anyone who can help you get through your journey and find some healing. 3, when you're ready, share your story with us.